Good morning and welcome to Arts Etobicoke's live workshop here on Instagram. This is Saturday, that'll be April 4th, and it's Poetry Month. I'm excited to get to lead this workshop and to tell you a little bit about what Poetry Month means to me as a poet. I'm part of the Toronto Poetry Project. We produce a bi-monthly show, which is now online. Our next show is April 17th, and we had a show last night. So if you've never been to a poetry slam, it's an interactive space where people read and share poetry, perform it, perhaps. And it's a site of community, a chance for people to kind of get instantaneous feedback and share poetry that is meant to entertain. So, this is not a poetry slam, this is a poetry and creative writing workshop. I'll be leading you through a few exercises, and because it's Poetry Month, I wanted to also start with a poem. So, this is a poem that I wrote, and it's for my grandmother. It goes a little something like this. You were the only grandparent I knew. The others died too soon. I remember your small apartment north on Bathurst, the taste of bacon, fricadilla, liver paste on rye bread, a smorgasbord of familiar comforts from an ocean away. First it was one son, then a second. When the third finally settled on Canadian soil, you gave up all you'd ever known. My father was the first to come to a Toronto still growing up, and the skyline's peak was the Royal York. But Denmark had as many people as Toronto, but it was so much seaside all around the countryside. Perhaps it's easier to cross an ocean when you come from a seafaring people, but how do you stay? Your sons paved the way while you learned what you could of this difficult language. Daily as it is, try not to confuse too many people with your own personal mix of Danish and English that sounded strangely incomprehensible, foreign, from away. So when you mix up the words water and waiter, you got glass after glass after glass of water, not the attention you were seeking. You used to shout to get attention. How else could you have done it in our family of together and apart? Fracture, bend, compensate, and mend. You were a seamstress, stitching lives, relationships, and continents together. You held us all together in moments like Festelavn and Lucia, lighting up the darkness, bringing us home to coffee and cheese sandwiches in a familiar, cozy church basement of Danish families landed on Finch Avenue West. It's one of the only places that still brings me back to you. That and smelling my crayon box. So it's a good thing you told me over and over and over again, Besta, that you love me. You always said it 3 times, in case the first 2 times it didn't sink in. I love you, I love you, I love you. I say it back now, but you can't hear me. I hope you knew it while you were here. You were royalty. From a land of story, mythology, and cycling where there is lineage reflected in language like hygge, which means coziness coming from the comforts of home. It doesn't translate well. But here I am trying to build just that, with my little rainbow slice of Moscow in our Toronto neighborhood, and I know now where this gift comes from, Besta. I will always tell you, I love you, I love you, I love you, and if I have the chance, I will tell my grandchildren too. Thank you. That's a poem I wrote called For Besta, dedicated to my grandmother. And because it's Poetry Month, I wanted to start our writing workshop with a little poem that I wrote. So I look forward to hearing what you will be writing today. I have a few exercises queued up for you, and I see a couple of familiar faces. Welcome Rahma, welcome Rainbow, welcome Akshata. Nice to be here with you today. Looking forward to seeing or hearing what you write. So before we dive into our first exercise at the top, I did want to mention a poetry spoken word resource. If you can, access it. There's a book called Word Warriors, 35 Women Leaders in the Spoken Word Revolution. It's a book that chronicles a number of poems and also tells stories that are beautiful about where the poems come from. So maybe a friend has it and you can borrow it. Maybe some of the stuff is online if you look up the different poets who are in here. Word Warriors, great resource. Are there any questions before we begin? There's a little chat box at the bottom with maybe a couple or a few or an ellipsis. So if you click on that, you can enter your questions throughout the workshop, now at the top or as we go through in the chat box there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So I'll give a moment for those, pick up my lucky pen, and get ready for this workshop. So what you'll need is your own pen. It doesn't have to be lucky, blue, black, ink, anything works. Pencil, crayon, anything goes. And you'll need something to write on. So I've just got my blank piece of paper here. Maybe you've got a notebook, maybe you've got line paper. All is good. And we're going to do an exercise. We did a workshop last week. If you were here then, welcome back. As you may remember, we started with a couple of activities then that were incremental, that allowed you to start step by step in terms of how to write or how to create something, and then we did a couple more open-ended exercises. So this workshop is going to model that same process in a particular way, and like I said, happy to have questions throughout, and we will do a little Q&A at the end. There wasn't quite enough time for that last time. So looking forward to this workshop together. And our first exercise, it's step by step. So there's 10 questions. I like to call it a poetry quiz. So you might want to write the numbers 1 to 10 on your page, or write them as we go. Now it's not necessarily going to turn out to be a poem that says 1. When you came to Canada, you always made me bacon, fricadilla, liver paste on rye bread, a smorgasbord of familiar comforts from an ocean away. 2. Finch Avenue West. You know, there's poems that sound like that. What I've done now is I've just tried to restructure the poem I shared with you in that form. So that works for some poems, but this is actually more playing with the idea of what a quiz is in school. So I have 10 questions for you, and there are no right or wrong answers to any of those questions. So anything goes. For example, question number 1 is, how does it begin? So it's an open-ended question. You don't need to write the question itself down, but anything that comes to mind when I say, how does it begin? What comes to mind? So that's our first question. So I'm going to invite you to take a moment to respond to that, maybe in this 1 minute or less of responding. You use the same structure in terms of it begins with, or just the words bang bang fireworks kind of come out of your mind. So anything goes. The first question is, how does it begin? All right, we're doing a poetry quiz. The first question is, how does it begin? And I'm not going to give you too much time for these, hopefully just enough. If you did want to put your responses in the chat with this little box at the bottom with a ... then feel free. So, how does it begin? Question number 2. When you wake up, what do you hear? When you wake up, what do you hear? Welcome. So we are doing a little poetry quiz. The first question was, how does it begin? And the second question is, when you wake up, what do you hear? You can use it as a free writing prompt, or if you feel so inclined, put your favorite answers into the chat. Question number 3. Who are your heroes? You could make a list or describe one in depth. Who are your heroes? welcome. We're doing a poetry quiz. We are answering the question, who are your heroes? All right. Nice work, everyone. Question number 4. What makes your heart sing? What makes your heart sing? Remember, for this poetry quiz, no right or wrong answers. Whatever comes to mind, first thought, best thought, just put it on the page and keep going with that. What makes your heart sing? Nice. So remember, I did say if you have a response you like, you're welcome to, or if you don't have a pen or paper, put your answers in the chat. I see one for question 4. Thank you. Authenticity. Nice. Question number 5. Why does it matter? Ooh. Why does it matter? No right or wrong answers, just put down what comes to mind. Awesome. If you joined late, question number 1 was how does it begin? And we have question number 5 here. Why does it matter? All right. Question number 6. I learned this from Louder Than a Bomb Chicago when they trained some of the Toronto Louder Than a Bomb artists. Just a really fruitful question. I like it, so shout out to them. What's something you like that no longer exists? Something you like that no longer exists. Question number 7. How do you want to be when you grow up? How do you want to be when you grow up? you've heard this question before, or some variation of it, like, what do you want to be, but how? How do you want to be when you grow up? Question number 8. If you were the weather today, look outside, get some inspiration. Look inside, get some inspiration. If you were the weather, what would you be? All right. Question number 8. You can answer it on your paper, in the chat. If you were the weather, what would you be today? All right, question number 8. If you're just joining, if you were the weather, what would you be? I've heard all sorts of answers to these questions when I've been in workshops with young people. So if you want to put your responses, whatever's coming to you, no right or wrong answers, if you want to add through the chat at the bottom with that little ... it'd be lovely to hear from you. Similarly, poetic, reflective question. If you were an astronaut, what would your last words on Earth be? Question number 9. We're in the home stretch of this quiz, step by step, writing something together. If you were an astronaut, what would your last words be? Right, and question number 10. So we're doing a step-by-step writing exercise. You can join in at any point by adding your responses in the chat. Question number 10. How does it end? No right or wrong answers. If I ask you, how does it end? What words would you think of? Nice. Okay, I've got my first draft, 10 questions, 10 answers, and I'd love to hear from you. We heard from a couple of people, so I've added some collective words of ours. I know these are in reverse. I'll show you it when we're properly done. But it's the middle stretch where I've got some responses, so I'm looking for a response definitely to number 10. 8, 9, and 10. Let's start with that. It doesn't have to be something brilliant or something super creative. Whatever came to mind was great. How does it end? Or if you remember, question number 8 was, if you were the weather, what would you be? Thank you. I have reluctantly. Good word. Sometimes we might feel reluctant to get to our writing practice. I know I have had some days this week where my poor little notebook is overflowing, and other days where it is resting a little on its own. So how does it end? Now, if you were the weather, what would you be? Sunny and warm like spring blossoming hopeful. Nice. And a storm, but the warm summer kind. So for those of you who have been in my workshops before, you might be able to imagine what I'm doing, but I promised I would show you the right side up version. So we are filling in the blanks for our poetry quiz to write something here. I see a sun shower, wonderful. And I'm also looking for question number 9 to fill out the bottom there. So that was, if you were an astronaut, what would your last words on Earth be? And if anyone joined late, our first question was, how does it begin? Paralleling our end question. So I'd love to hear your responses to that one, whether you were here or joined. How does it begin? Let's see a couple of responses to that. It could begin like that, it could end like that. See you later. I'll put that, see you later. Ah, that was number 9. Last words as an astronaut. Okay. Well, let me move that down. I always think of Douglas Adams. Is it Douglas Adams, the science fiction writer who wrote So Long and Thanks for All the Fish? All the sucker fish. So how does it begin? I think that might be enough for us to make a group poem. Rahma, a bright Saturday morning welcoming me with through white shutters tilted open. Nice. And that's always a beautiful thing, to begin right where we are, right? In this Saturday, welcoming me in. I don't think anyone could say the word shuttered. Shutters tilted. This is the thing about spoken word, that when we write things and we start to say them out loud, then it might change the words that we use, or it might give us a whole kind of resonance and sound that we want to play with. So if we say shutters tilted, shutters tilted, shutters tilted, you can play with sounds. Tilled, shutted, shuttered, and yeah, wonderful. So if anyone really loved When You Wake Up, What Do You Hear? Or Who Are Your Heroes? That's questions 2 and 3. Those are the last responses I'll take, so we can move this along and keep time for our other exercises. So this is our poetry quiz. It's looking great. Doing a great job, everyone. Oh dear, sorry. Blurry, 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 blurry. I don't know if there's an automatic focus. Oh yeah, there you go. See what you wrote? Okay. So, the thing is, we have a bright Saturday morning welcoming me in with white shutters tilted open. Authenticity, it just is. Chips like French fries, organized, sunny and warm like spring blossoming hopeful, a storm, but the warm summer kind, a sun shower. See you later, suckers. It ends reluctantly when the curtain closes. We have the buzzes of appliances and nature. So what we're doing through this quiz is trying to get some raw material to work with. You can hear that it sounds pretty raw when I read it through to you like a list. It doesn't sound like birdsong or something harmonious. It sounds a little bit disjointed. So this is where editing comes in. I'm going to add birdsong and the sound of silence dancing, twirling in the blue skies. So if you have one really good line, like say number 2 was your favorite line, and the birdsong and sound of silence dancing, twirling in the blue skies was something that you then wanted to use as a writing prompt, maybe highlight it, circle it, put some stars or squiggles beside it, or pull out a new page and write down your favorite line. That's one way of editing this piece, is getting rid of all the other 9 or 10 responses that you came up with and keeping just your favorites and writing about that. I have seen some cases where people are able to keep all 10 responses to the questions. So I like to show an example of what it looks like to try to keep all 10 questions, and partly because it sets the bar of like, well, first of all, I've had practice doing this before. But secondly, you might actually hear something that doesn't sound like it fits. And so for your version, you would probably cut it out. So let's look at this quiz, this text that we came up with, and see what it would sound like, pardon me, if we made it into a poem. So I'm going to work to use all 10 of the pieces. On a bright Saturday morning that welcomes me into the sound of silence buzzing around me like birds and appliances, the intermixed sounds of nature. It just is like authenticity sitting in the room, sunny, a new day, warm like spring, blossoming and hopeful. Feels like a storm is on the horizon. Hopefully it will still stay warm, perhaps a sun shower, organizing itself for a chip truck kind of day with French fries and a reluctant ending where it's a beautiful kind of day, the song of birds singing again as the curtain closes. Okay, so we got something. Maybe we like it, maybe we don't like it. I started at the top, tried to bring in some of these things. I struggled with the chips as French fries. That was like a 90s thing that used to exist. So we could just cross that out if we wanted. Or if we liked having a food reference and something more tangible, maybe if it didn't work the first time, the way to work with it to improve it is to actually kind of make a list and add on something there. So you can see some of it, flowed nicely because we had a few interesting responses for question 8. The astronaut with the suckers, how do we fit that in? But editing is actually, a really important part of this art. So that's an example of something that we can create. I hope you have at least one line from your quiz that you wrote, that you like, that you can set aside for working on maybe later today or sometime this weekend. So we're going to move into our next set of writing exercises. We opened with a poem. We've done this poetry quiz. Thank you all for being here. We will end with a Q&A, so definitely feel free to keep any questions that you have regarding process or editing, or maybe more specifically, how would you work with this or something else. So yeah, unless there's any burning questions that you wanted to pop into the chat, I'm going to use a tool that is one of my favorites now, and I like it because there's variety with it, but also there's simplicity and consistency. What is it? Oh dear, I really gotta get this. There it is. It is Be With Cards for Self-Care. So this is a box of self-care cards that has been modified to be turned into a deck of writing prompts. So this is a version of it that I call the workshop deck. So we've got some that are writing prompts per se, because they have the words write on them. So there's 6 different categories like affirm or speak. So we've got a deck of cards. Clearly this is well used and loved. And I'm going to invite a couple of people for this workshop to interact with the card deck, to pull out the cards that they want from this pile here. And then we will write about these for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I don't often forget that I come from the slam poetry community, so we like to have our 10-second grace period. So here we go. Oops, shuffled the deck, some of the cards onto the floor. Perfect, wonderful. Here we go. We have a whole deck of writing prompts here. Of course, you can get books like 642 Things to Write About, or you can use a blank notebook and make your own list of things about whatever comes to mind. There's lots and lots of ways to come up with categories and topics and things to write about as starting points. That's certainly part of the creative process. But why don't we have a couple of people pick a color, like if you wanted a yellow, a teal, a green, a red card. Oh, there's a blue, a purple. I can pick one for you, and we will see what you are being called to write about today. So anyone who would like a card drawn for them, please feel free to put a note in the chat, and I'll pick maybe 3 cards total so that we can have a few different starting points for the whole group. So we have a teal. I'm going to pick this teal. I am doing my best. Beautiful. Definitely a phrase that I was raised with. Now, Rahma, you actually suggested 2 categories, so this means we have all 3 cards that we need. Here's another question. What is the gentlest thing I could do right now? So far we have I am doing my best, and what is the gentlest thing I could do right now? And then our final card from Rainbow is the right card. So here we go. What does it say? Pick a meaningful person in your life and write them a letter. Mail it or keep it somewhere special. Great. So we are going to set this whole deck aside and focus on these 3 starting points. So I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I invite you to pick a meaningful person in your life and write them a letter. What you do with it afterwards will probably depend on what it sounds like, so maybe don't focus too hard on that now. Just think of who you'd like to write a letter to, someone important, special, someone here, gone. Or write about what is the gentlest thing you could do right now. What's the gentlest thing you could do right now? Or our third and final choice for this increment of free writing is I am doing my best. So I'm going to start the timer. We are going to have 3 minutes and approximately 10 seconds. And the goal is to write non-stop about any of these ideas. Just keep writing non-stop. Use it as a starting point, use it as a theme, come back to it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And I've only given you 2 minutes on the timer, so let me make sure I do give you 3. Oh. This is going to take both of my hands here. If you have any questions about how we'll do this, sometimes people ask me, do I have to share? Do I get to share? You can share maybe something that comes up, but don't think too much about that right now. Let that be just for you to start, and then if you like it, if something comes of it, then perhaps you can share something. And if you don't like it, you can always put it in your recycling bin at home or wherever you are, staying socially distant. All right, the time is set. On your marks, get set. Let's write. All right, that's our time. So we were free writing automatically, some people call it, writing nonstop for 3 minutes about one of our prompts. So we had either pick a meaningful person in your life and write them a letter, or write about what's the gentlest thing you could do right now. A great card for these times. Also great for this time. I'm doing my best. So, I would like to see if there is anyone here who wants to share anything. One way to share, as you know from our previous writing exercise, is to put something in the chat. The other option is actually to come on through video. Now, I'm not sure if you're prepared or set up, if you have a camera stand, or, you know, what your setup is like, but would love to hear your reflection on any of those writing prompts. I chose the I am doing my best one. You could hear even when I drew the card that it was something that spoke to me immediately. And so some of the words that come out are fire, afraid, and flaws. Yeah, sometimes I read what I write in a workshop setting, and sometimes I'll keep it for later. In an actual physical room, it's easier to get some contributions from people. Of course, it feels a little bit different when we are being broadcast over the internet. You know, from near a closet, or a window, or a desk, all over the world. So, yeah, if there's anything you want to share, take a moment to read over what you just wrote, and you can enter it into the chat. Or tell me about the writing process too. I wonder, did anyone manage to write about all 3 of our starting points? Picking a person in your life and saying, you know, dear grandmother, the gentlest thing I can do right now is remember you, you know, through making food, through spending time lighting candles, through thinking of you, you know that this is a hard time, but I'm doing my best, always honoring you in all the ways I can, you know, reading books and thinking of you, right? Definitely strange and surreal times. Thanks for your comment, Rahma. Hanging by a Thread, that song, it's an old song, has been coming to me. It has something like that. Hanging by a moment here with you. Is it Lifehouse or something? Give that one a listen to. See if there's any lyrics that make you want to write some more about that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. We've got Rahma saying, strange and surreal times, hanging by a thread. Definitely bound to ride some interesting feelings in unprecedented times. And that's actually why writing is a really important tool to be able to kind of digest, compost, process. One of the writing books that I really like is Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, and she has a little essay about composting, about how when we write regularly and keep coming back to the page, we are kind of taking in the things of our daily life. Our mundane life right now might not be boring, it might be overwhelming, but it's almost all the more important time to come up with space for that kind of integration through writing. I'm struggling with the themes time and space. Oh yeah, I think that's a really great one to struggle with. Thanks for sharing Columbus Upside Down. I'm definitely working with it in my own ways as well, and I would offer that I think the ways that we negotiate with time and space through our minds and through the internet, which is modeled on ideas and technology, is such a different scale of time and space than what our bodies do, right? So even in this workshop, sitting to write for 3 minutes, it feels really different than the way that we are mostly engaging through this platform, right? It's quiet, it takes some time, you know? I didn't even fill a whole page in the 3 minutes. It's kind of organic in its own way, right? So yeah, one of the basic devices of poetry is contrast. So if you were able to kind of play with how far and how fast through time and space we can go through the internet, you know, versus through our own organic. I'd love to hear that poem. Can you read it to me now? Too soon? Too soon, maybe. I mean, if it's not, send me a message, let me know. Great. Well, we're coming into the home stretch of our poetry writing workshop, so let's clean up these cards, these beauties, put them back into the deck. And I mentioned at the top that this is a great resource for Poetry Month. There's all sorts of beautiful writing from all sorts of different poets, and I'm not finding the one that I'm looking for exactly. Calls to Journalism. Where is existence now? Oh yeah, that's a great theme to write about as well. So what I wanted to offer is that with a book, sometimes you can open it to any book, to a random page, and pull out a line. And this isn't actually the page that I had planned, it's close by, but this does happen to be one of my favorite poets. So it's Andrea Gibson, and this is their poem, Andrew, and at the end it says, "And we held each other like I held these words for too many years on the tip of my tongue. I am my mother's daughter, I am midnight's sun. You can find me on the moon, waxing and waning, my heart full of petals, every single one begging, love me, love me, love me, wherever I am, whoever I become." So sometimes if you have a book of poetry that already is written, or a favorite poet, you can work with maybe just one of their lines. Of course, giving quotes and attribution. If I could, I would tag Andrea right now. You can find their work online, and they were actually touring until recently. So, for example, the line that jumps out at me is, "My heart full of petals." So why don't we write about how our hearts are full of petals in honor of one of my favorite poets on this month of poetry, Poetry Month. Last week when we met, it was still March. Now we're into a whole new month. So, my heart full of petals. So I can try to show you maybe what it looks like. There it is. I am midnight sun. You can find me on the moon, waxing and waning, my heart full of petals. That's the line. I want to spend 3 minutes writing about that, if you can. My heart full of petals. Of course, when we're writing, we want to write with, beyond, through stereotypes and cliches, right? So if you can give somebody a new perspective, that's something that all of us are always hungry for in a particular way, right? So 3 minutes, my heart full of petals, and this will be our final writing exercise. After this, we are going to take a couple of questions. Any questions about the writing process before we wrap up? And if you missed the writing exercises at the beginning, you can circle back. We'll post this live on the Arts Etobicoke handle, so you can complete them all today or through the weekend. I guess you'll have 24 hours. And stay tuned if it's reposted elsewhere. So let me set the timer for this writing about my heart full of petals. On your marks, get set, go. finish up that word or phrase or sentence, we were writing about my heart full of petals, a line from Andrea Gibson. And if anyone would like to share what they came up with, I'd be glad to hear it. You can enter something in the chat. I'll read you this, I guess. We will have a Zoom call next weekend instead of an Instagram Live because it's hard to get people's video here or audio sharing. So we're hoping it'll be more like the room of an actual writing workshop. So stay tuned for that being posted on Arts Etobicoke's handles. Because as much as I love the sound of my own voice, I also love hearing from what you wrote. So if there's a line or a phrase that you came up with, feel free to put it in the chat here. My heart full of petals, a line by Andrea Gibson. Each flower blooming tentatively, saying, "Hey, is spring here really? What's with all the people walking around? Spring fevers hit hard, I guess. My heart, almost hardened by winter's cold embrace, deep snow, dark cold, moon waxing and waning, through long nights of crisp air and more stars. Did you see the trees? How they offered themselves to carry all that snow like it was no thing at all. If only my heart had just as much room for all of these petals blooming in the middle of this grief and loss." Sounds like the beginning of a poem to me. Curious about where it would go from here. Of course, first writing is a starting point and a really useful thing to be able to do in a workshop. Editing is something that takes a bit more time, and as we saw in our poetry quiz, we can continue to work on that. So I'm wondering if you have any questions about any of the writing exercises that we did today, or anything more generally about the writing process. I'm happy to take your questions before we head out back into the rest of our Saturdays. Catterdays. No? Maybe? You don't have a cat in your life? Back into Saturday. I was just remembering and looking for our quiz. If you joined us late, we had 10 open-ended questions and we wrote about them. Now I did that wonderful thing of using both sides of the paper, which means you can't see, but we had to get rid of a line. About Chips's French fries. Any questions before we go? Anything you wanted to share from our last writing exercise? Hello. All right, so we are here at Arts Etobicoke. I invite you to look for our writing workshop happening next Saturday. We will be sharing the link via Zoom and would love to have you in that writing room. So it'll be interactive. There will be writing exercises much like this. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to hear a little bit more from you. Thank you for being here. Writing isn't easy. That's part of what it makes it worthwhile. I'm grateful that you could be spending some time on this sunny, cloudy Saturday afternoon and thinking about the artistic process with me. So thank you for being here. Thank you for writing. Keep writing. Keep taking good care of yourselves. And where's my little heart button to like all of you being here? Thank you for being here. See you next Saturday in the Zoom room for a writing workshop. Take good care, everyone. Bye.